This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bikeworks HMB, your one-stop shop for bike service, sales, and rentals in Half Moon Bay, California. Whether you're on the mountain, road, or low on battery, Bikeworks HMB has your back. So come on down to 520 Kelly Street and come talk some shop with the boys. All right, I'm GT. Peace out. Enjoy this episode of the podcast.
What's up, friends of the show, and welcome back to the Between Shifts podcast. Today we have a guest who actually used their college degree throughout their professional life, and today you'll find him spending time wrangling words and catching waves. That's right, this dude is just as comfortable covered in salt water as he is with a pen in his hand. Join us as we flip through the pages of his life, and welcome to the podcast, Mr. Steve Hawk.
Wow.
Thanks for coming on, Steve.
Well written intro.
Oh, it took me, the last intro took me like 6 or 7 tries. I've been practicing this one all day.
Just don't check the grammar.
Yeah. Yeah, my writing isn't great. But let's start off kind of early life here. And so you were raised in San Diego, but if I remember correctly, your parents had you and your 2 sisters, and you've actually corrected me since, but I thought it was in the Bay Area, and you were born in Florida, I guess, and then your sisters were born in San Diego?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this really the kind of the story of our family's journey. They got them in San Diego. My parents in San Diego my dad was in the Navy. So he was it's a kind of interesting story, actually. He was a torpedo bomber in World War II. He flew off aircraft carriers. He was at Okinawa. And he was born in 23.
Okay.
So we just celebrated his 100th anniversary.
Wow.
Or his 100th birthday,
100th.
I should say.
Yeah.
He died in 95. But, and actually for his 100th birthday, my brother and my sisters and I decided to go to his favorite restaurant. And my dad had really shitty taste in restaurants. So we ended up at a Sizzler.
Oh,
Nice.
But I live up here, so I had to find an open Sizzler in the Bay Area. And
Yeah.
they're hard to come by these days.
Is there one in San Bruno, maybe?
Yes, that
The
was
one?
it.
Yeah,
That
by
was
the
it.
by the airport.
Of course you know where this is.
me and your dad would have had the same taste.
My brother and my 2 sisters went to the Sizzler down in San Diego, and we timed it so we were there at the same time, so we could like FaceTime.
That's cool.
Hey to Dad and have terrible salted steaks.
Yeah, we did the same thing with my grandpa on his birthday every year. We go and get Costco hot dogs.
That's perfect.
Everyone in the family, we all take selfies because people are all over the U.S. So it's like, selfie with your Costco hot dog. So,
That's perfect.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
actually, so I know you guys want to do this chronologically, but I'm going to detour just for a minute.
Okay.
That's fine.
When my dad died, my brother and I, we decided to spread his ashes in the ocean because both my parents loved the water. That's how I came to be a surfer. It's kind of how Tony came skater. By the way, we haven't said it yet, so my brother is Tony Hawk.
We'll get to it.
I was gonna get
Hate to think that that's kind of a given. But when my dad died, we spread his ashes in San Diego at a beach on a really hot day in Solana Beach. Water was packed. The beach was packed. We had to kind of sneak out with the ashes, and the lifeguard was barking at us because I was on a surfboard and my brothers were swimming, and you had to keep the swimmers and the surfers separate. And we dumped him, and we got I got ashes. I got his ashes all over me, and
Oh my God.
but my brother and I saved some. And because my dad was a really good woodworker, for years he built my brother's ramps.
Okay.
And he also built a pagoda in my backyard at one point. And he built these really cool little play tables for my son Will and Tony's son Riley when they were little. And so Tony and I saved some of his ashes, and we went to the Home Depot in Oceanside that he used to go to all the time. And we walked up and down the aisles to the places where we knew, like, oh, he used to use that kind of saw.
Spread his ashes there.
Spread his ashes in the Home Depot.
Really cool.
But next time we'll celebrate with a hot dog.
There you go. You should have spread them in the Sizzler. Yeah.
Little sprinkle.
Yeah. So then real quick, you were then born in Florida.
Yeah. So my dad was stationed in Florida.
Okay.
He was actually stationed at the flight school in Alabama, which was that Top Gun flight school.
Okay.
And he was at that point he was an instructor.
Okay.
And then because I was born in 55 and the war ended in 45. But then they moved. Then he transferred to San Diego, and that's why we ended up in San Diego.
Gotcha.
And then they loved it there because he'd been in Hawaii. He fell in love with the ocean. My sisters were both born in Coronado, and then Tony was born years later, and also in San Diego.
Yeah. Well,
What part of San Diego did you grow up?
A place called Kearny Mesa, Serra Mesa, which is like about 10 miles from the ocean. Basically, kind of directly north of where the Chargers used to play, that football stadium in Mission Valley.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
and your dad was lifetime, pretty much his whole career was with the Navy as a Navy pilot?
No, he actually retired after like 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so he retired in the mid 60s, early 60s.
Okay.
That was when he got into woodworking?
Yeah, he had a bunch of odd jobs. He never really cared too much about a career. He was an interesting bird, my dad. He sold stuff. At one point he had a business that imported music, sold used cars for a while. He sold appliances for GE for a while.
Oh, wow. He did it all.
Just kind of bounced around. He lived in a really small little house in this low income area. But the one thing that, my brother and my sisters and I all benefited from was that he kind of devoted his life to his kids.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Spend a lot of time with him.
Yeah, we did spend a lot of time with him. He did a lot of stuff for us. And he was also kind of an iconoclast. He was very different from most of the other guys who fought in World War II. So I was just a couple of years too young to go to Vietnam.
Okay.
But it was close.
Yeah.
And he was really worried that I was going to go to that war. So when I was in high school in like 72, 73, for Christmas one year, he put a big peace sign on the side of our house out of Christmas lights, which in a military neighborhood in San Diego was kind of a thing.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And then my sister, Pat, who's 5 years older than me, she had a really good singing voice, and so she became a singer in a rock band in the 60s. And he stepped up. He built their sound equipment. He managed the band. He drove her to her gigs.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then when I started surfing, he would drive me to surf contests and 5 a.m.
Yeah, it sounds like he was so passionate about anything you guys wanted to do.
Anything we wanted to
right?
do, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
And then when Tony was young, he was a stubborn, determined little kid, and kind of a jerk when he was little. He wanted to do things his way, and he took up skateboarding when I gave him a board when he was 9, and he really obviously took to it. But when he started competing and really kind of committing to it at like 10, 11, 12, he was still playing Little League in a league that my dad had created. They had moved to a new neighborhood. And midway through the season, Tony said, "Dad, I don't want to play baseball. I want to skate."
Nice.
And my dad said, "Fine, go ahead." And then my dad finished out the season and then moved on to create the California Amateur Skateboard League,
Oh,
which still exists.
wow.
That's really
That
cool.
was in 82. It's still around. And then created the National Skateboard Association, which was the professional version of it, which kind of over the years morphed and is now kind of the official governing body for U.S. skateboarding in the Olympics.
Wow. Yeah, your dad seems like he was a very committed guy.
He was kind of quietly so, he would never really kind of talk in those ways, but
Yeah.
if he saw that something wasn't right, he'd said, "You know what, I think I can do this better," and he would just step in and do it.
Wow.
He, a lot of the skaters back then didn't like him because he was still had that Navy mentality. He was kind of a drill sergeant, kind of a grump.
Yeah.
But
He did fight in World War II, so
fought in World War II,
I mean, yeah.
dropping bombs on little islands around.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about how he would take you to surf contests and everything. I mean, you found surfing around 13.
Yeah, I found surfing around 13, but my folks both loved the ocean, and so did my sisters. This is all before Tony was born, and they because they really were kind of scraping to make money. They ended up buying a hot dog stand on the beach in Ocean Beach in San Diego, down where the pier is there.
Yeah.
This was before the pier was built, and that was like in 1960. So from when I was 5 till I was like 10, I was on the beach every day from 8 in the morning till sunset.
Wow.
And my mom used to say that the lifeguards were my babysitters. So I learned to body surf and get comfortable in the water at a really young age. And we used to, the whole family, my dad, my mom, my sisters, we'd all go body surfing together. So the ocean kind of seeped into my bloodstream at a really young age, but I didn't pick up surfboarding, riding on a board, until my sister gave me a hand-me-down board when I was like 13.
Okay. Cool.
So the lack of equipment was probably the only thing keeping you from.
Yeah, and also just access, and also in those days, boards were really big.
Yeah.
It was right at the beginning of the shortboard era, which was 67, 68. And so they were kind of just too big and clunky to carry around.
And what was Ocean Beach like that, like back then compared to what it is now?
It was pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of fights between kind of the surfers and the heavy guys.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of prostitution, and it was kind of a gnarly.
Yeah,
We didn't want to hang out there after dark.
Yeah, it's not the cleanest place now, but I can only imagine it's cleaned up from what it was. Yeah.
At what point was it? Because I had listened to a podcast with your brother in it, and he was telling a story about you and him doing toe-ins somewhere in Hawaii on a big wave. I can't remember exactly what happened, but he was telling the story, and I think something went a little south. You have that story?
Yeah, it didn't go super south. Yeah, that was. We just happened to be in Hawaii for like a big family thing. This would have been, I think I had just left Surfer magazine, so like in the early 2000s, and but I knew Laird Hamilton a little bit, and from my years at Surfer, and reached out to him, and he found out that my brother was there, and Tony was already pretty famous at that point. So he invited us to go toe and surfing with him. So it was me and Tony and one of our nephews and two of our nephews, and Laird and Dave Kalama and Rush Randall.
Wow.
And they took us out to this place called Sprecklesville, which is pretty close to Jaws, but not. Okay. It wasn't. So Tony says it was big.
It was skater big.
It was exactly. I mean, it was like double overhead. It was pretty big, but it wasn't like Jaws or Mavericks or anything like that. And it was phenomenal. Like Laird, I will forever have a soft spot for Laird for doing that for us.
Yeah.
He towed me into a wave that I just couldn't believe, and I'm on like a 5.5 board, that you can do anything on.
Yeah.
And then Tony got one and looked back and freaked out because there was this big barrel behind him, and he wiped out, and he couldn't breathe. He was going to get caught by the next one. I think that was the first time where he ever got held down, where he started to worry a little bit. So that's why.
Yeah, that must have been the story.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. Well, when you gave Tony his first skateboard, if I'm not mistaken, you were in college. He was 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Did you realize at that point in time that little moment there? I'm sure you didn't, but that little moment there was going to shape like just the trajectory of your guys' family, because you fell in love with surfing, but also he's a big skateboarder. So did you understand I don't know.
It's kind of creating history.
Yeah. Did you understand, really? Did you expect anything to come from that situation?
I think obviously in the moment, no. Or I could say, yes, I actually foresaw that he was going to be skating in the White House.
It's going to be this great thing.
Yeah. No, it was just a toy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that, in retrospect, you can look at that as a moment for sure. But at the time, it was just, I bought a new skateboard. I had an old one. I was home for the summer. I gave it to him. like it's today I could see someone perhaps having that revelation because skateboarding is a legitimate career, that's in the Olympics. But at that point, and for decades after, nobody skated professionally past the age of 25.
Yeah.
And so I gave him the board in 74, no, the 77. And, there were like 10 professional skateboarders in the world at that point.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple dozen. So there was no way you could have foreseen it.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's kind of one of the beautiful things about Tony's career for me is that the whole time that he was getting good and falling more and more in love with it, he had no concept of it ever being a way of life. It was purely for the love.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson there that I've taken from my little brother is, that's how you live. You find something you want to do that you love, and if you make a career at it, then that's just fucking gravy. That's just amazing.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you got into writing and editing for Surfer Magazine and Surfline?
Yeah, although I really wanted to make a living at it, you know. So I remember when I got my first job on a paper, I wanted to be a writer from when I was pretty young. I remember I wrote a thing in like second grade that some cute little girl in class said something like, "Oh, I really like that." And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then all through high school and college, I kind of realized that was my strength. And I remember when I finally got a job at a little newspaper making $150 a week in 79, waiting tables on weekends so I could pay my rent. But when I filled out my taxes that year under occupation, I got to write the word writer.
Yeah.
That was just really made me happy.
Yeah.
But I kind of followed a career path where I wanted to make sure I could pay my rent.
Yeah.
So I worked on newspapers for 10 years, and when you work on newspapers, it's exciting and you get to write some stuff that you care about. But for the most part, you're just churning out stories about city council meetings and,
Local crime.
local crime, elections.
But it's a big stepping stone into
Yeah.
the experience and
Yeah. But you learn how to, you learn how to put sentences together, learn how to meet a deadline.
Yep.
And the other thing is you learn how to gather a wide array of facts and assimilate them into a narrative. That's the biggest lesson you learn.
Yeah.
And how to do it pretty quickly.
Yeah. And you get to learn how to do that research too, right? Like that's part of it. And
Yeah, and this was all pre-internet.
yeah. Our research on you was a little easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Real quick, what was the skateboard culture like back then too, in those years? Because I know there was a story where I think the principal took Tony's skateboard, and it would, any normal parent wouldn't
Right.
even go back to get it, and your dad went back and
Yeah. Well, but at that point, he was already kind of making a living at it.
okay.
So it's like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the skateboard culture was very much underground.
Yeah.
And I, as a surfer though, I thought it was really cool. And then I remember when Tony really started kind of getting good at it and making a name for himself in the early '80s, and like got a picture in Thrasher and got a cover of Transworld, and then he got onto the Bones Brigade. But even before that, I remember I got to go to a contest in Ventura, and I saw the Dogtown guys skating around, Tony Alva and Jay Adams and Stacy Peralta. And I was a surfer.
Yeah.
I skated a bit, but I thought, okay, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen. Like these guys are so stylish, and this is a whole new thing. So I kind of thought skating was really cool from a surfing perspective, but I was one of the only people in the country who thought that. A lot of people thought skating was just for kids, and so Tony suffered that stigma.
Yeah.
When he was in high school, he was shunned. He was also, both he and I were very late bloomers You know, I went through puberty at like 17.
Wow. Okay.
And my driver's license when I turned 16 said 5'5", 105 pounds.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and I'm 6'3".
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tony, almost exact same growth pattern. And he's
Wow.
also 6'3". Like,
Yeah.
And so he was bullied for sure. I wasn't really bullied that much, but he was.
Yeah.
And then when he got, you know, he talked about this a lot. When he started kind of developing a name for himself in skating, he had a kind of a robotic style, but he knew how to do tricks. But, you know, all the hardcore OG guys like Dwayne Peters and Steve Alba and
Peralta. And
not Stacy so much, because Stacy was his mentor.
okay.
But they were like sneering at him, like he was this little kid with his little twirly whirly tricks and stuff. You know, there's a famous story of Dwayne Peters. Like first time Tony saw him at a skate park, he was all stoked. He kind of sidled up to him and tried to be part of the conversation. Peters looked at him and spit in the ground and said, "This is punk rock, kid." So Tony was so like skateboarding was an outcast sport, and Tony was an outcast among skaters. So
Yeah.
he kind of had a little bit chip on his shoulder there for a while, which was I think was one of his motivating factors.
I mean, what was skating to you at that time though? Because I mean, you had a board, you gave it
Yeah.
to him, you bought another board.
It was just I just wanted to mimic surfing.
Yeah.
You know, so I would go to bowls and stuff. I've never dropped into a quarter pipe. It's really embarrassing for me to say that. I've never done an air. I've never done a grind on coping.
But you got Tony to drop into or get towed into a wave.
I was happy to step back and watch him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to step back real quick too and go kind of back to your parents real quick, because your dad was a Navy pilot based out of San Francisco, I think at the time, and your mom went on a work trip up to San Francisco, and that's where they met. And did that have any pull on why you ended up moving up to Northern California?
No.
No.
No, what brought me to Northern California was I had just left Surfer magazine in like 98, and I was doing some freelance work, and it was right that during the beginning of the first big .com boom.
Okay.
And a couple of big people with a lot of money came in and to fund some action sports websites. Excuse me. And it was a good time to be the former editor of Surfer magazine, because they wanted someone with that expertise. So I got hired by this company called Swell.com, which bought Surfline.com. And they decided that they were going to have their headquarters up in San Francisco, because this was where all the tech workers were.
Yep.
So they hired me, there was all this money, gave me a salary that was almost double what I'd been making at Surfer. It was just stupid. And then we hired this gigantic staff, because we were going to do a skate site and a snowboard site and a surf site. I think I had a total of like 35 people under me just on the editorial side.
Wow.
Like this wasn't on the tech side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they moved. They not only did I get a signing bonus to join this company, they paid our moving costs up here.
Wow.
So when we were living in San Clemente at the time, our kids were 6 and 8, and this is in 1999, and we moved up here right at the end of 1999. But first I had friends who lived up here who surfed, so I just came up and made sure my wife knew we were going to live someplace.
Half Moon Bay was already in the sights.
Yeah. But it was like, if you're going to move to the Bay Area as a surfer, we didn't want to live in the city.
Yeah.
You weren't going to live in the East Bay.
Yeah.
If you go to the North Bay, you're still like an hour from the coast, no matter where you live, or you're an hour from the city.
Yep.
This was just the kind of obvious place.
Yeah.
Half hour from San Francisco.
Yeah.
Near some of the wildest coast in California. It's crazy. So it was obvious we moved here, bought a house, and then literally like 6 months after we moved here, 8 months after we moved here, they decided to move the headquarters back to San Clemente, like a mile from the house that we sold.
Oh, Mike.
So my wife and I, and my wife was an editor at the LA Times. She had a really good job that she left, because I was making enough money for her to like not have to worry about that. And then the .com crash happened, and so I went from like a staff of 35 to 15 to 10, and then to like me and one other dude.
Yeah.
And
you got to continue to work from up here
just for
while you
I was only there for about 2 years, and
Yeah.
then, but my wife and I looked at each other and said, "God, this is so much better than San Clemente.
Well,
We're not going to
Yeah.
go back." So we figured it out. She got a job working remotely for the LA Times. I found some work, and yeah, we stayed.
Remote work in 2000. That's
One of
Yeah.
the first people on the LA Times. Good catch.
I know.
Yeah,
I was thinking this.
Yeah, because there was not a lot of internet going on.
yeah.
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 Especially not on the coast, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's really good, and that's how she got the gig.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because you've been on a lot of different adventures, but I just was wondering what that has taught you about chasing the things that matter. Like you've experienced a lot of joy, a lot of adventure. What does traveling and experiencing those things teach you? What's something that you're taking away from that, from all your travels?
Well, I think everybody should travel.
Mhm.
You know, it for no other reason than it makes you realize that there are a lot of different points of view in the world beyond just our little bubble here. And that goes for even just traveling within the United States. Bay Area is very much a bubble. I have a son living in San Antonio. It's a whole different kind of bubble.
Oh, yeah.
So good for me to go there. Good for them to come here.
Mhm.
But also, you just realize how privileged and lucky and blessed we are to live in a place like this. If you end up going to Rwanda or Indonesia, so in that regard, it's eye-opening. I think I read a thing about just a shockingly low percentage of Americans even have passports.
Yeah.
They don't go anywhere.
Mine's
Yeah.
expired. I have it, but it's expired.
So there's that. I think just from a cultural perspective, I think the world would be a better place if everybody kind of swapped positions for a while. The idea that we have no idea what's really going on in Africa or the poorest parts of Latin America or particularly in the Middle East is a tragedy. But that's one kind of travel. Most of my travel has been for surf, which is can be very myopic and self-centered, and just about getting the most waves you can. But at the same time, I feel like if more people surfed and did that, they would understand kind of how precious and inspiring and fragile the natural world is.
Mm-hmm.
And the world would be a better place for that as well. So any kind of travel, I think, is good.
Yeah.
But if you can get away from this urban, suburban carousel and get out to where, I've done boat trips to the Aleutians looking for surf, and walked beaches where I'm pretty sure just a handful of people in history have walked. That changes your perspective on things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I feel like there is something with surf tourism in general, where there definitely is an aspect to it that you get picked up from the airport, you get driven to a resort, and even though you are in say a third world country, you don't see it because it's just airport to the resort and surfing, and it's
Right.
Of course you've definitely had those experiences
For sure. Yeah.
but I feel like you probably enjoy getting a little bit more outside of that.
I do for sure.
Yeah.
Although, all the Alaska stuff has a little bit of that to it.
Yeah.
Because I go from the airport to a boat, and then I'm on the boat alone with my crew for a while.
Yeah.
But it's different than going to someplace like Indo, where you're
Yeah.
just sort of ignoring all the actual, abject poverty
Yeah.
in that nation to extract their natural resource for your own pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of an extractive form of travel.
Yeah. Well,
But that's a really good point, because I think that a lot of surfers are guilty of that.
Yeah.
They really are. And it's hard to go to a place and just get off the plane with your board and a backpack and say, I'm going to go figure it out when I get
Yeah.
there, and depend on the grace of the locals and all that. Like nobody's doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all pre-planned and
Yeah,
and a lot of Indonesia, I guess, is mostly tourist based as it is.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like one of
that's
their
right.
biggest import exports.
Yeah.
And then going back to college days, you went to UCSB.
I went to UC Santa Barbara because my oldest sister, Lenore, who's 8 years older than me, she went there.
Okay.
And then she stayed there, and got married and stayed there. And I went up to visit her when I was like 16 with a handful of my surf buddies from San Diego, and we ended up surfing Rincon. And I'd never surfed a Point Break before, and I was like, oh, shit. And then wait, there's a spot called Campus Point at UC Santa Barbara. Only the students get to surf. That sounds
Oh, no way.
Back then, it
Is
was
that-
kind of like that.
Yeah. So
That's
it's
cool.
Is that a thing anymore? Where that's
I don't know.
Okay,
I
yeah.
think they can't keep people out if you really want to
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Used to be like you couldn't even drive onto the campus with
Okay.
the surfboard. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But then the Isla Vista party scene. I mean, in our generation, I have friends that go down there. Looks absolutely hectic. Huge party school.
Yeah.
Similar back then.
Not like it is now, where
Okay.
like that's what everybody knows.
Yeah.
It was more of this. It was more of a stoner school.
Yeah.
Like not the frat boy doing,
beer bong,
beer bong, that kind of thing.
keg stands.
Yeah. There was some of that, but the frats were really like
Yeah.
not a thing
Yeah.
back there. But there was, there was a lot of pot. There was a lot of psychedelics. There really weren't many hard drugs.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know anybody who was really doing blow or certainly no opioids or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I was high a lot, and a lot of my friends were high a lot.
Yeah.
Help
Yep.
the creative writing.
Not for me.
Yeah.
No, the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I seize up.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm right there with you.
What was everyone going to think about me if I write the wrong word?
Yeah. So despite being a few years older than your brother Tony, were you guys ever competitive at all? So at the time that he was landing the first documented 900, you were also surfing you went on a month-long surf trip to Antarctica.
Yeah.
I mean, was it
Not the exact moment, but yeah.
within
same.
probably a year or something?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
No. I can honestly say, and this isn't bullshit at all, that Tony and I have just never had any kind of negative, competitive, brotherly rivalry, ever. Because, I'm 13 years older, so when he was 5, I was 18.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad weren't getting along so well at that point.
Okay.
They had some issues in their marriage, and my dad was kind of didn't know how to handle Tony before he kind of found this
Outlet.
calmness, this
Okay.
outlet through
Yeah.
this outlet through skating. And I saw that, so I would kind of felt like I was kind of rescuing him, like, hey, let's go do something. I'll take you to the beach. Then when he was skating, I would take him to the skate park a lot and take him to the beach a lot. So, our relationship I've said this a few times, has always been kind of part paternal and part fraternal, part brother, part dad.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of changed. Now he's the dad. Okay, Tony, whatever it is.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. But much more just kind of mutual respect right now. And I've said to him to his face and in public a lot, like, I'm nothing but proud of what he's done. He's he, without necessarily even wanting it, he became the face of that sport, which is having a moment. Like it's in the Olympics, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize there's just all this kind of social and psychological benefit to learning how to skate because of how hard it is and how much you have to fail and how failing's okay, and then you just got to keep at it. And he, through this huge, ridiculous sequence of coincidences and good fortune, became the voice of that. He's the face of it, right? And there's no more famous skater in the world. He wouldn't, I think that's just objectively true. He's not necessarily the best skater in the world. Was never the best skater in the world.
Yeah.
He would say that. because it's best is just a weird term to apply to
Yeah.
that sport. But I feel like the sport is really lucky that he ended up being the guy.
Yeah.
Because he's calm, he's articulate, he's authentic as fuck. You know, he skates all the time still. He's in his mid to late 50s. Skates all the time. It's what keeps him alive. And that's why he's been so successful.
Pretty cool.
So yeah, no competition.
No
I
competitiveness.
love
It
him to
was,
death.
yeah.
I was gonna say I really respect the way that you speak about him too, because I feel like it would be pretty easy to get sick of hearing talk about Tony when
Yeah.
that's a lot of what you hear, I'm sure. But yeah, it's really cool to hear you speak so highly of him, and there's no sense of competitiveness there, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. No, I'll talk about him all day. If you guys want to just make a podcast.
No, we want to talk more about you.
Yeah,
but I think
we want your story.
Yeah.
David
but-
had questions about the Antarctica trip, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a crazy thing because you're probably one of the few people that have surfed all 7 continents.
Yeah.
Is that something you're like super proud of, or is that just like a fun fact you can throw out there?
It's a good question. I'm proud of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't go around shouting it all the time, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was one of the reasons I'm proud of it was fucking hard. Like that
Yeah.
was not an easy trip. But I will say, I've gotten a lot of miles out of it over the years. Like
Yeah.
I can break that out, and people will sit up and listen. But you know, we especially, which is kind of ridiculous if you think about the fact that we really had one day of good surf in a month,
Wow.
Yeah.
and a couple of really brutal, scary moments on that sailboat when the wind came up and there was ice all around. And
Yeah.
I'm glad I went, but I'm one of the few people on that boat who's like, okay, I'm glad I did that, but I don't need to go back.
I mean, because getting to Antarctica in the first place is not an easy feat.
No, yeah, it was a long day.
Yeah.
It was a long. Yeah, so we flew to Ushuaia, which is the southernmost city in Argentina.
Okay.
It's right above Tierra del Fuego. Or it's in Tierra del Fuego. It's right above Cape, like due north of Cape Horn. And it calls itself the southernmost city in the world, but there's actually another city in Chile that's a little bit farther south. And that's just getting there is a long slog. And then we got on the boat and went across the Drake Passage, which a lot of people say is the gnarliest crossing you can make if you get it bad. We lucked out. We had like trailing winds and not heavy seas, and made it in like 3 days when sometimes it takes 5.
Okay.
Wow.
And it's like 400, 500 miles
Okay.
from, so the reason you go out of Ushuaia and out of Tierra del Fuego is that the Antarctica Peninsula comes up to the north right there, and that's the shortest you can go. But that's one reason why that crossing is so gnarly, because it kind of funnels right there, and all the storms come through.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, in all the old Moby Dick and all those books, they went down. They came down the east coast of South America, and then tried to go west around Cape Horn to get up to California, and you're going against the wind there.
Yeah.
And it's heavy. So that was, and then once we got down there, we were on a lot of these islands and areas that were really poorly charted or completely uncharted. So the skipper's looking out the whole time, and the coast there is not like the coast here where it kind of slopes gently into the water. Most of the places we went, there were just rocks jutting up straight out of the water. So there'd be spires. A couple of times on the boat, all of a sudden, just bam, we'd hit something underwater.
Whoa.
Oh.
And I remember I was in the wheelhouse with the skipper, and I was like, was that a rock?
We're gonna die.
And he was this French guy, and he goes, not anymore. It
How big was the sailboat that you guys were on?
was a 73-foot catch.
Well, the fact that it was a sailboat in the first place
Yeah.
is crazy.
Well, we motored the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah. He motored all the way down, all the way around down there, and then when we came back north, and we were west of Cape Horn, so we had to go east, and we went past Cape Horn,
Okay.
and he shut the engine off and raised the sails and said, you can only sail past Cape Horn.
So coming from someone that's never been to Antarctica, you must have. There's
Not alone.
Yeah. I would imagine there's not a lot of infrastructure there, and you probably had to pack everything that you wanted to bring,
Oh, for sure.
right?
Yeah.
So that boat must have been packed. I mean, you had to have
Yeah.
however many
They
people
had
there
a
for a
giant
month.
hold full of stuff. So
Yeah.
and there was a lot of shopping in advance to fill it up with stuff. Yeah, the thing about Antarctica is that it's never been occupied.
Yeah.
Like it's the only place where the humans never settled. So, and there's no plant life.
Yeah.
It's all rocks and ice and birds and sea mammals and shit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of poop.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go.
Yeah.
It's really stinky.
Nowhere for it to decompose, right? It's all
Yeah.
just everything's frozen and rocks. Yeah.
And then what's interesting also is because there's no plant life, the only time you see driftwood is if it's milled lumber from like a boat or,
Okay.
or some structure that broke apart.
Okay.
There's
Whoa.
no like logs. It's not like Alaska.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a trip. Yeah.
Oh, well. That's crazy,
Yeah.
actually. And then what was the surf like on that one day that you guys got to surf? I mean, and what was what wetsuits were you guys wearing? Because
We
it's
were
gonna
wearing
be
We were in dry suits,
okay.
3 mil dry suits with like a 3 mil undergarment.
Yeah.
That was,
Wow.
and O'Neill kind of set us up. Everybody got these custom suits. We also had 7.5s for that we wore like in when we surfed around Tierra del Fuego a little bit too.
Okay.
We found a really good wave there too, but it was small. I would go back there.
Okay.
That there's some magical surf spots around down by Cape Horn and between Cape Horn and Ushuaia. And that's adventure enough.
Yeah. That's
That's out there.
But yes, we found this wave that was really interesting. I've got to tell this story a shit ton of times, so forgive me for anyone who's heard it before. But there was so the glaciers there are all retreating, and we found this reef pass that had been created by a glacier that at its terminus had they advance in like bulldozers, so it had scoured this kind of reef, and it was kind of canted to the incoming surf like you wanted a point break,
Okay.
and some of the rocks were exposed, so it was shallow enough that, and it was also kind of slopey. It wasn't just straight up and down, and we saw it from the back of the boat, and it was the first time the whole trip. This was like 3 weeks in, maybe 2.5 weeks in, where we actually realized like, oh shit, that wave is roping. Like that's a good wave. You can tell from behind. And we weren't sure how big it was, but it turned out to be like 8 to 10 foot faces, like
Okay.
nothing heavy, kind of like trestles, like a nice pleasure point-ish kind of wave, like not that like it. The sets were a little throaty. They had some oomph to them because it didn't move out. It would just kind of double up, but it had some oomph. Like it was fast, and I remember we had a professional surfer on the trip, Chris Malloy, who's a Santa Barbara guy now, very famous at the time. Great guy. We spent a month on a boat in Antarctica with somebody. You either
Yeah.
you want to kill him or you want to marry him.
Yeah.
And we proposed. But Chris has become a really good friend. And we saw this wave, and Chris and I were like, shit, let's go. Like, this is on. So we kind of suited up quickly before everybody else did, because I wanted to be like the first person to ride it, because it's like a thing,
Yeah.
guaranteed no one ever surfed this spot before.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
So I jump in the water and I'm paddling toward it, and fucking Malloy paddled right by me because he's younger and
Yeah.
way
Couldn't
more
let you
fit.
have it.
Yeah, he got the first wave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he'd already ridden, like that was my chance. He'd already ridden other waves for the first time, but it was a really good wave. But the coolest thing about it was, so we were about a half mile. It was hard to tell, quarter mile, third of a mile from this 400-foot glacier face. And between this little reef that it had formed and the glacier face was this gigantic lagoon that was filled with ice, because every 10 or 15 minutes, walls of ice would calve off.
Yeah.
And sometimes big enough that they'd send like backwash out through the lineup. And the first time it happened, we realized that there was actually a wave breaking on the reef in reverse that was almost as good as the wave we were surfing.
Oh.
Yeah.
So Malloy tried to scratch in to get one
Oh God.
because that was going to be a left.
Yeah.
and he didn't get there in time. But because at the end of the reef there was this like little channel where the water would come out from this big lagoon and go, depending on which way the tide was going, and there were ice chunks kind of moving up into the lineup. So you'd hear the ice hitting your fins as you were going down the line. And if you duck dove at the wrong time, sometimes they'd be like
big
serious
chunks.
ice.
Yeah.
And then there were penguins jumping around.
That's crazy.
It sounds
like-
super cool.
It sounds like not real.
It was like, what? I don't know where to
Have
Yeah.
Have you ever watched Weird Waves with Dylan Graves?
love that.
It's such a good
Yeah.
series.
He's very good too.
He is very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
He does a really good narration over the videos as well. And he
Yeah.
explains why the wave is the way that the wave is. It's
Right.
really cool. But I think he went.
He went to Alaska and
Alaska.
did. So I've been to the glacier he tried to surf.
Oh no way!
Yeah, but it was after him,
Oh,
and I was on the same boat.
oh no.
And
That's cool.
and Mike, the skipper, told us, Mike McCune, if you're listening, Mike, God bless you. Mike said that that Dylan's crew was hardcore. Like they went to the beach because they realized that that only happens like every half hour, 45 minutes. You get a wave that's actually big enough to surf.
You're good.
And these guys would just sit there with their cameras ready in freezing cold in Alaska, and Dylan was in the water just waiting for this thing to go.
Yeah.
And they got like a pretty good clip.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, yeah,
I got to ride one that was like 6 inches on a sub.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he got like a 2-foot.
Yeah,
Wave?
like a legit
Yeah.
wave.
Rode it for a pretty good amount of time. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that guy's he surfed tanker wakes in Texas.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
Like big ones.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah,
Wake
and he
surfing
surfed
behind a tanker.
surfed that tidal bore in Alaska, the Turnagain Arm.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then he
Jerkin.
did the. My favorite one was in Africa, the river wave.
The
I don't know
river
if you
wave.
saw that.
Yeah, yeah, the
and the
Zimbabwe.
river
Yeah.
wave actually kind of has a little bit of a barrel,
Yeah,
and he was trying to get into that. I was like, this guy's fucking awesome,
Yeah.
dude.
that wave is gnarly.
Yeah, it looks insane. Right after it's just all the rapids.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, going back to
College days.
Yeah.
no, not college days. All right.
Let's go
So
college days.
you did teach at Stanford for a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah,
So
that was
you-
pretty late.
Yeah, but you were doing some work for their magazine, and then you ended up teaching an environmental journalism
Environmental
class.
journalism. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll go back then. So after I was at Surfer, I went to Surfline, and then Surfline had that contraction because of the .com bust. Yeah, I left there, and I eventually got a job. I did some other stuff for a little bit. I ended up going back to Surfer Magazine as the editorial director over all the publications at, it was called the Action Sports Group. So I was the editorial director over Surfer. At that point, they bought Surfing Magazine, but also like Bike and Climbing and Powder and Snowboarder. I did that for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then I lucked out and got a job in Hollywood on that show, John from Cincinnati, that we had talked about earlier, I think before the mics went on.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a little bit too. Yeah.
And then I got I tried to make it go in Hollywood, and that just didn't work out. And I wrote some spec scripts, and nobody wanted to buy them. So I went around looking for a job, and I ended up getting a job at the Sierra Club editing their magazine. Because the guy who was the communications director there had worked with my wife at the LA Times. He actually wanted to hire her. And she said, I have a job, but my husband's unemployed. You should hire my And so I worked at the Sierra Club for about 6 years, editing their magazine, which was for just for members only. They didn't even have a newsstand play at that point anymore. But it was a big club, so it was like 600,000 circulation. It was a big magazine.
Oh wow.
And that was 6 times a year. It came out, and we would do about half of what we did was writing about the kind of political side of the Sierra Club, and the other half was their writing about what they were originally meant to be, which was an outdoor adventure club. You know, it was started by John Muir as a hiking club, so we did some of both. So I was able to apply some of what I'd learned at Surfer and all those other magazines on how to write a story or edit a story and pick photos that would excite people to want to go outside. And then I got while I was working at Sierra, I got invited down to do a couple of guest appearances at the environmental journalism course at the Earth Sciences School at Stanford.
Okay.
And eventually they kept bringing me back, and eventually the guy asked me to teach it.
Wow.
So in 2016, I think I taught that class for 1 semester.
Oh, awesome.
They didn't invite me back.
Do you have any ways that you prevent burnout when you're writing? Because it seems like, especially when you're talking about with the Sierra Club, you come out with something 6 months out of the year, right? Or 6 times out of the year. So, and I'm sure every time that one magazine felt like it was like all of your creative mind into that, right? So like, how do you go about preventing burnout? Because I can't write like 2 things without, I don't want to write anymore.
Truly, surfing. Surfing was a big escape for me.
Yeah.
And my family, my kids, you know, coming home and just turning off that side of your brain. But sometimes it would get to be burnout, and you'd want to just it's weird, you know, when you it shouldn't be. I shouldn't be allowed to complain about this shit, but you know, because I wasn't emptying garbage cans all day. You know, I wasn't like picking strawberries. You know, I was at a desk. It's very much an easy job. But you know, you if you're really thinking about something hard for a long time, you sort of forget about your posture and you tense up, and then you feel it there more than anywhere else. But I could always sort of wash the day away by jumping in the water.
That's really healthy.
And also, you know, it was interesting when I didn't realize this till I was I worked at the Orange County Register for a while on the business desk, and newspapers, magazines are actually categorized as a manufacturing industry.
Oh, okay.
You're making a product.
Yeah.
You're getting it out the door. It's not. So that kind of media was considered manufacturing in the classification that the Department of Commerce used, I think. So you're like, you got a deadline, you got to get it out, and you kind of forget about the fact that it's like mental work. It's more like, especially in a magazine, you've got to, you know, correct things, and in newspapers, sometimes we would actually go watch them roll off the presses, you know.
Yeah. Did you find the editing part of the job was easier than the creative part of the job, or did you have more fun with the creative side of that?
Yeah, you know, I would actually argue that the editing side can be the creative side.
Yeah.
And although easier than just writing something from scratch. So I found when I was at Surfer especially, I would lean more into trying to find a good writer, helping them write the best thing they could, but let them do the heavy lift of the first draft, you know.
Yeah.
And because that's where the real work gets done.
And most of those years that you were at the when you were with the newspaper, you were doing that kind of heavy lifting, right?
When I was at Surfer, I was actually editing more than I was writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you were, because your first job out of college, I believe, was with the newspaper, right?
At the newspapers, for sure.
Technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties.
So we're going to cut back into that. And you were doing some heavy lifting at your first job out of college at the newspaper before you got into editing. And
Yeah. So my first job was at this little paper in Solana Beach called the San Diego Citizen. It was just tiny, small circulation, but that was in the era when newspapers were a very viable industry. And when I got my first job, it was pretty clear. Unlike today, the career path was pretty obvious. You work for a couple of years at a small paper, kind of like August Howell did at the Half Moon Bay Review. You put in the hours. It's a lot of hours, and you learn how to write a story in an hour and a half, and then you develop some clips. You go to a bigger paper. You show them your clips, and then you go to that paper. Maybe they give you more time between stories. So you can actually do better work, and then you get better clips, and you go to a bigger paper. And so I ended up going from the San Diego Citizen to this paper in Oceanside called the Blade Tribune, and from there to a really good little paper in Escondido called the Escondido Times Advocate, which had a great editor, and then ended up being a launching pad for a bunch of really successful journalists over the years. A lot of the people there ended up at the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and Washington Post. And then, so I got some really good clips there. And then I got hired at the Orange County Register, which was at that point like the third biggest paper in California. It was a big paper. It was like 450,000 circ. And,
wow.
That was in 84. I got hired there, and I worked there for 6 years, and I kind of bounced around. I had different gigs. I was an environmental reporter. I started in a small, like down in South County in El Toro, covering just a bunch of bullshit little city stuff. It was pretty boring. Every now and then a fun story would come across. But that you're writing 5 stories a week, so you're doing like a story a day. And then sometimes you'd have a long-term thing that you would do between that would take you a couple months. And I got to do a couple of things I really liked. That turned out to be pretty good clips. And I was kind of on a trajectory, I thought, to like go to the next step, which would have been like the LA Times or the New York Times, but the LA Times, a lot of people were going from the Orange County Register to the LA Times, which at that point was like the 3rd or 4th biggest paper in the country. But because I was in Orange County, I started freelancing for the Surf magazine for surfing and Surfer, because I was still surfing a lot, and at every paper I was at, I was like the token surfer. So I got all the surf related story. I did the first profile ever of Sean Collins and Surfline.com back in 85.
And you were still working at
I was at the Orange County Register.
Okay.
Yeah. And I became friends with Sean, and eventually that's how we ended up bringing him into Swell.com. But so I was freelancing for the Surf mags, and then I found out that out of the blue, I got a call from a headhunter that the job at Surfer was that they were looking for. I didn't know that the editor there was leaving at the time.
Do you remember that feeling of when Matt Warshaw, who was the editor there before, do you remember that hearing he was leaving and
Yeah, I was pretty stoked.
Yes. What was that feeling like? Yeah. I mean, you were going to get to go work with
I was actually really nervous.
Okay.
Really nervous because that was the job I wanted.
Yeah.
That was the first time in my life, like, I want this job.
Yeah.
And I didn't know Matt at that point.
Okay.
I had written one thing for Surfer, but I'd had another editor before him. And then I was writing a lot for Surfing magazine, which was their primary competitor. But I was kind of unknown in the surf journalism world at that point. I'd had a few pieces, but the one thing I brought to the table when I wrote those was that I had at that point like 10 years of legitimate journalism experience. So I would call up people that their other reporters wouldn't call up. I remember I did a profile of a guy named Jimmy Hogan, who was kind of like not on the world tour, but on the U.S. tour, very good surfer out of Santa Cruz. And he had been a really good high school wrestler. So I called up his high school wrestling coach and said, how good was he? And he said, the best I've ever coached. Like, this kid could have been in the Olympics.
Wow.
And so I put that in, and I remember the editor going, God, you talked to his high school coach. Of course I did. Like, that's how it works.
Well, that's what you knew at the time,
That's what you
right?
did.
Yeah.
And so it was, there just wasn't a lot of attention to true kind of journalistic practices at the Surf Mag.
So you brought in another attribute to that.
Yeah,
to that
I felt like it.
fixture.
But I remember when I interviewed for the job, there were two big moments. One was I met with Steve Pesman, who went on to found the Surfer's Journal, who had been the editor and publisher of Surfer forever. He was the publisher, not the editor of Surfer at that point. So he was on the business side, but still kind of overseeing the editorial stuff. And I came in, and I was in my newspaper garb. So, like, newspaper reporters in those days, you always wore a tie, but it was unbuttoned at the top, like that. It was that Woodward and Bernstein look. And I didn't wear a jacket, but I had a buttoned-up shirt with a tie. And I'm sure he was thinking, oh, who's this dude? But we had a really good conversation, because I read the magazine closely before we met. I went back and read their previous six issues, like, really closely. So I had some critiques, and I could kind of, when we left, I left thinking, fuck, I think this guy's going to offer me this job. This is crazy. And then I came back to meet with Warshaw, who has since become a really good friend. One of I think one of the best surf writer out there. Warshaw took me surfing. That was his interview. I used to make sure I wasn't a kook.
Yeah. Let's get you out of these reportive.
And we went to Upper Trestles, and it was, I don't know, like shoulder head high. And, I got a couple of waves, and I at that point I was riding shortboards and I knew how to surf. So that kind of sealed the deal. But I remember feeling afterwards like, fuck yeah, I had to surf.
That's pretty cool.
You get to work with like some like-minded individuals then, right? Yeah.
What was the transition like going from newspapers to magazines to eventually online?
That's a good question, because the transition was profound. At newspapers, I had always been, reporters are just openly skeptical, and you sort of, part of your job is questioning your bosses. So I remember a lot of meetings at newspapers where the publisher would come up and talk about, like, we had at the Orange County Register especially, super conservative editorial page, like libertarian. They thought Ronald Reagan was too far to the left.
Oh, well.
And we used to, and all the reporters, we weren't allowed to show how biased we were, but reporters in general are pretty liberal. But I remember, like, these reporters just grilling their boss, in a room full of people, and it's a bunch of reporters, and they all want to show the other, like, I'm going to ask the most badass question in this room. and I remember also there was this really thick wall between editorial and advertising. Advertisers weren't even allowed to talk to reporters.
Wow.
Okay.
I wrote some stories about businesses, and turns out, who were like being sued, but they were also advertisers, and they called me up and say, hey, you can't do this. I'm going to pull my ads. And I was like, dude, I'm not allowed to talk to you. If my editor finds out I'm talking to you, like, you got to call your ad rep. Like, this is not allowed. First week on the job at Surfer, the publisher takes me to every big advertiser.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to meet Bob McKnight at Quicksilver. You're going to meet Bob Hurley, who was at Billabong at that point. You're going to meet Fernando at Reef Brazil, and because they want to tell me what their thoughts about the magazine were.
Yeah,
it's a whole different world.
Wow.
Way more open-minded, it sounds like, too, right?
Well, let's just say they weren't interested in us doing any kind of investigative journalism on whether Quicksilver was manipulating its stock.
Yeah.
It was more like, how big a barrel did Kelly get in the ventilators?
Yeah.
the other thing was, when you ask about the transition, I had never been a boss. I had always been like the kind of the griping employee. And I was a shitty boss for several years. First got there. I was nice, but I would not, like, I didn't know how to get people to like enforce rules or anything.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say no.
Yeah.
And that's not the best boss.
Well, I know with surfing, just locals in general, it doesn't matter. I mean, you know, with surf journalism, you're covering all different places.
Yeah.
And locals in general
Yeah.
can be not very friendly about that.
Yeah.
Any regrets that you have from any, I don't know, sort of situations that you got in with maybe locals being like, I don't know, blowing up this spot or this or that? I mean, is there one that stands out to you as, man, I wish I maybe didn't do that?
Okay, that's a bullshit question. I'm going to walk out of here now. It's interesting. We kept some places hidden,
Yeah.
Or we wouldn't say, which really violated my journalistic ethics.
Yeah.
So I was kind of battling that a bit. No, I can't say there was one spot that we did where we did a story and then it blew up and people got pissed off because the locals, all of a sudden it descended.
Yeah.
We did the first piece on Alaska ever, but Alaska's still, no one's talking about crowds there.
Yeah.
We did the first piece on Madeira, which was
In Portugal.
in Portugal. It's
Azores.
those islands off of North
Yeah,
Africa.
That's where my family's from.
Is it really?
Yeah.
God, that's a beautiful,
Azore Islands, right? That's where you're
beautiful place. Yeah.
We're from Terceira Island.
There's some really good surfing. And that place ultimately blew up, but I don't think that was because of us. Like,
Yeah.
word just kind of got out. We did have one funny story though, where we sent the crew up to Oregon, and they surfed the spot that's called Boy Scout Camp, and the photographer was shooting, and it was like Josh Mulcoy, I forget who else was on the trip, and the backdrop is obvious. If you've it's a huge sheer cliff.
Pacific City, like Oregon area,
I think that's where it is.
where it's got the massive rock in the background.
This is actually more of like a sheer cliff.
Oh, okay.
And some local came up to the photographer on the beach and said, "You're not allowed. What are you doing this?"
Yeah.
And he said, "No, don't worry. This is just for me and my friends. We're not going to publish a thing on it." He lied to the guy. And because the guy was like, I'm going to take your camera and I'm going to film. And then the article came out, and that dude who met the photographer on the beach called me up and said, "What the fuck? Your photographer lied. You threatened him." Of course he lied.
Yeah.
But we didn't, all we said was like, north of California. We didn't give away where it was. And only people knew where. So yeah, that was a tough thing. I think that the magazine made some mistakes over the years, probably a couple on my watch. I know earlier they did some stuff that probably shouldn't have. I remember one time that somebody delivered a box of their own feces to the door of the surfing.
God.
Oh
But that was-
my God.
That was like in the 70s or 80s.
Okay.
before I got that.
Yeah. Back when the scene was a little more loped out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they probably had to pay a bunch for postage at the time too. It's not like it is now.
I think he might have done it
Oh.
nearby.
Hand
Yeah.
It was hand
hand delivered.
delivered.
Yeah.
Either way, he's still committed to that bit.
Well, as Surfer Magazine was coming to possibly an end in 2020, what do you think the surfing community was going to lose out on not having that magazine before it ultimately made its comeback in 2024?
Yeah, well, so it hasn't really come back.
Yeah.
They did the one print issue in 2024, and I think there are plans. I know there are plans to do maybe 2 a year, but at least 1 a year. But that felt like kind of a one-off.
Yeah.
And the problem is that for all magazines, Facebook kind of killed them all.
Yeah.
And advertisers now, they want to know super precisely how effective their ads are. And in the magazine world, that was just all squishy. There's no way to tell whether by having the back cover of Surfer magazine, 12 times a year at the cost of $120,000 a year was really going to help you out.
Yeah.
But it did. I mean, for the most part, it kind of worked. But it was always kind of a weird model. And, so magazines back then, our newsstand sales, that was a lost leader for us. We would sell on a good issue 40% of the issues we put out. The other 60% we were throwing away.
Yeah.
And what happened was it's shifted a bit now. There's a new model for magazines that Steve Pesman at Surfer's Journal kind of pioneered, which is 4 times a year, only like 8 or 10 pages of advertising. I think right now the Surfer's Journal has like 16 pages of advertising in a 124-page issue. But they charge $15 an issue, $16 an issue. That's where they make the money.
Yeah.
And so you don't need a huge circulation to break even on that. And Pesman proved that. Eventually bought the building that he was renting in San Clemente because their income was so good. And there's a number of magazines like that out these days. That it's like getting a coffee table book every 4 months.
Yeah.
Every 3 months.
Well, you get that cover and yeah.
Well, the only thing that's left for me with mountain biking, I think I just got into it too late. By the time I was like 14, 15, print media for mountain biking had already dropped off.
Right.
And now all I have to look forward to for print media with mountain biking is essentially one like photo book, issue.
Yeah.
And, it's like 250 pages, but it's just
oversized, trim size, probably super thick paper.
Exactly.
Really
Super nice stock.
photos.
It's $40, $50. And
Is it that much?
yeah,
Wow.
but it's one a year and it just recaps the entire race season,
Mm.
That's
But,
pretty cool.
and like, it's awesome and I love them. I've got like, what?
Those are all keepers, right?
Yeah.
You don't throw those away.
Oh, no.
Coffee
and
book models. Yeah.
they were on my coffee table for a while and
yeah.
I was like, no, these are too nice for the coffee
Yeah.
table. Like these are going in my closet.
Do you find the creative styles were more influencing when it was still paper issues versus online? Do you think that there was more creativeness, paper versus online?
Well, for one thing, yeah, there was. So what's different now is like somebody can take a video of their buddy getting an incredible barrel at Pipeline, put it online, and get 50,000 views. John or Nathan Florence post something.
Yeah.
There's they go viral, but there's no curation, and there's no. I mean, those guys. Florence in particular, they do a very good job with some of their videos that they put out that are like, here's a video that's been edited and we've got music and all that. But what I loved about magazines and what breaks my heart that it doesn't exist anymore is we had some really talented art directors who would do interesting stuff with typography, and we'd sift through dozens and dozens of photos to find the best one that would fit with the headline and the subhead, and that moment when you open a magazine and see the opening spread of a good story. It's way more than just the photo, and it's how it all mixes together, and a really good art director can just it's one of the old saying that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I know it's is that the right? I think I got that backwards. But
Yeah.
but all those things together just bring it to a new level. And I miss that. Like I love that part of magazine. But I think I'm a rare bird in that regard. I don't know if that many people, because I was in that world. Like if I see a magazine that does it right, I'm really impressed.
Did you ever do any coverage on wakeboarding at all?
No.
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 I was going to say, because I feel like that was kind of coming up around the same time that you took on.
No, you mean like behind a boat?
Yeah, behind a boat. Yeah.
No, nothing mechanized.
Yeah.
But speaking of different sports besides surfing, I mean, because when you were the editor at, was it Action
Sierra Club?
Sports or Action Sports
Yeah,
Global?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Where
the
it's-
Action Sports Group. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like a bunch of different sports. And you were the editor for all of them.
Well, I was like the kind of consulting editor for all of them.
Okay.
So the idea there was to, because Surfer was was definitely the first action sports magazine ever,
Yeah.
but it was one of the first kind of niche sports magazines ever.
Yeah.
It came out in 1960.
Wow.
Like the only other magazines that were like that were like Hot Rod and Field and Stream.
Yeah.
And over the decades, it had kind of established itself and built these kind of best practices. So I was trying to help these other magazines kind of do what Surfer did.
Yeah.
That's all.
And was there one that you liked working with the most? Like,
Oh, that's a good question. I liked working with Snowboarder.
yeah,
Because I was doing that a little bit, and it had a lot of similarities to surfing.
yeah, for sure.
And I just kind of liked the subculture. Like I liked those people.
Yeah.
I really liked working with Skateboarder because of that as well. Skateboarder was the skateboard guys were super creative, and unafraid to take chances.
Yeah, for sure.
Climbing was a little different for me. I didn't follow that so much. I didn't know that much about skiing for powder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, with Sierra Club, as a mountain biker, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a pretty polarizing, like,
Yeah.
I mean, and
Isn't
of
that
course,
one of your bullshit questions?
yeah, it is. But like, I love backpacking. Sierra Club, it's
Yeah.
very cool. But also as a mountain biker, it's one of those
Sure.
things where it is really polarizing. And
Within the Sierra Club. Also.
yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Was there a moment where you felt like there was a message that was being pushed, or something like the direction that the Sierra Club wanted you to go, that you were like, I don't know, that's a little extreme?
Yeah,
or-
that's it. Yeah, that's tough because we didn't do too much with mountain biking when I was at the magazine.
Yeah,
I knew that there were divided factions within the club.
yeah,
Because on the one hand, we were trying really hard to engage and kind of enlist outdoor adventurers into the club.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about stopping coal-fire power plants and all that stuff or oil drilling. It was also about preserving the environment.
exactly.
And, there's no better way to do that than to get someone out there fishing or hunting.
Yeah.
Mountain biking, in some cases, could be a little destructive
Yes,
on a landscape. And I think
Yes.
mountain bikers would
I
agree with
agree.
that.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of keeping them contained within certain areas
Yeah.
that where if you've got a true wilderness area that's covered by the Wilderness Act, where nothing mechanized is allowed, and even the trails are hikers aren't allowed to go off trail.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain spots that mountain bikers should avoid.
Oh yeah.
And at the same time, I know there were some horrible stories about these Luddites trying to putting wires across.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right? To really hurt mountain bikers.
Yes.
Yeah, that was all bullshit. And we covered that a bit. We tried to cover it fairly on both sides.
Yeah.
But the club itself, and when I was there anyway, I think was kind of torn between it because they wanted mountain bikers
It's outdoor recreation in general.
it's outdoor recreation, and a lot of times you're going to it takes you to these beautiful areas. I think that to me it's like surfing. Like I can't understand how any surfers aren't environmentalists. You're the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
And when it comes to ocean pollution, and the idea that you would vote for anybody who would, try to gut the Clean Water Act, it just doesn't make sense to me. There's a lot of conservative surfers,
Oh yeah.
especially in Southern California,
Yeah.
and I don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, bit of a transition here, but you were a writer on the TV show John from Cincinnati. Was there ever any talks of a second season, since the first season had decent viewership, I'm sure?
I think that was one of the problems. It didn't have.
Oh, it didn't have to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you?
Yeah,
That's a bit of a transition.
That was a
from
life
action
changing.
sports writing.
Well, and it does have a cult following. I mean,
Yeah.
there's
Little bit. I haven't met the cult yet.
I'm right here.
Later.
Well, I think the issue too was the first episode came on directly after the season finale for The Sopranos.
Which we thought was going to be.
A great idea.
That's just funny. You know what? The timing of this is amazing because just last night, my wife and I have spent the last 4 or 5 months kind of on and off, watching the entire series of The Sopranos,
Yeah.
which is
Amazing.
one of the
Yeah.
3 or 4
Still have
best
to watch it.
shows.
Oh,
Oh, dude.
yeah.
So we watched the last episode last night,
Yeah.
just last night.
Oh boy.
Did you
And
put on John from Cincinnati right after?
I actually said to my wife, honey, come on.
Come on.
Like, she's like, let's just say she's not part of the cult.
Okay.
And what happened with that episode, I don't know if you remember this, spoiler alert. Do you remember how it ends?
The
Sopranos.
end of the. Oh no.
Sopranos.
The very end of the.
So The Sopranos had one of the most controversial endings in the history of television, where Tony is in a restaurant with his family, and they just slow everything down, not like slow-mo, but like all of a sudden there's all these details, and they had done that like the previous 4 episodes, and okay, well, someone's about to get assassinated.
Yeah.
Like there's there's going to be an attempt, and this guy comes in to the restaurant, and he goes into the bathroom. Tony Soprano sitting with his wife and son at the table. He looks up, his daughter's coming through the door. You see him look at her, and then it goes dark.
Yeah.
And no music, nothing.
Just
Credits roll for like 3 minutes.
yeah.
No sound. But that was David Chase, the creator, saying he's just been shot. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's really obvious.
It's over.
Because they dropped a couple of hints in the 2 episodes before of people talking about how, when you get shot, you don't hear it because the bullet goes faster than the sound. So it was pretty obvious foretelling, actually. But the audience freaked out. Like, people were emailing HBO, what the fuck happened? Did my TV go wrong, And then it goes to black completely. And then you hear the opening chords to the theme song for John from Cincinnati.
A little more upbeat. Yeah.
And it kind of like, because I remember at the time when I was working with Milch, he had just done Deadwood, which was, I think, arguably the best show in the history of television. And we all thought, okay, this is it. Milch is coming off of Deadwood. We're moving into the Sopranos time slot at like 9:00 on Sundays. This show is having its premiere after the last episode of The Sopranos, which is going to be the most watched thing ever.
Yep.
Like, game on. This show is going to kill. And then it just like didn't.
Yeah.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to figure out that show.
Yeah. Well, I read that there was almost 12 million viewers for that last episode of The Sopranos, and then it dropped down to just over 3 million, I guess, for
John Cincinnati.
John's from
See,
Cincinnati.
I've never heard
so,
that number.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Ouch.
Everybody was too busy writing emails to.
Well, that 3 minutes.
Or talking about it. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a brilliant ending. It was,
Yeah.
Now that I just watched it for the second time ever last night, and I was like, God damn! I wish I'd thought of that. That was so smart.
Yeah.
Well, and so John from Cincinnati never got a second season. And
No, it was doomed. They canceled it even before we finished shooting the last episode.
Okay.
Everybody knew it was over. Yeah,
Okay.
but also David Milch was the creator of that show. I think he was, so he ended up suffering pretty severely from early onset Alzheimer's. And I think we were starting to see just the beginning of that, maybe, because he would give us all these speeches about what the show meant that would go on for like 45 minutes. And for a while, we're all like, I don't know what the show's about.
Like, where's the show going next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this truly and literally the smartest guy I've ever met.
Well,
The most creative, smartest guy.
and he also,
Brilliant.
I believe, created the show with Kem Nunn. He
John
also-
from Cincinnati.
yeah.
Yeah. But he also, before that, he created NYPD Blue. And before that, he was on Hill Street Blues.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Well, and Kem Nunn was kind of more in your field, where he
He
wrote.
was a novelist.
Yeah, he was a novelist before he was part of the creator of that show. And the novel that he wrote, which was called, I wrote it down, Tapping the Source, was the inspiration for the original Point Break movie.
Kind of.
Okay.
A little bit.
Okay.
I think more, but just about the setting and the milieu. The actual
Okay.
plot almost had nothing to do with Point Break.
Okay.
But-
Did you know him pretty well, and did you?
Yeah. So when I was at Surfer, I was a fan of Tapping the Source, and I hired him to do a thing for us. So we actually roomed together in Hawaii for about a week while he wrote a piece for us, and then we got to be friends. And then he wrote his second surf book, which was Dogs of Winter, kind of loosely based on some stuff we'd done together. And then we became really good friends. He's a dear friend.
Yeah.
So he was the one who invited me to come up and meet David Milch and
Oh.
try to get me to be a consultant on that John for Cincinnati when they were just starting to brainstorm. But
Wow.
they were still shooting Deadwood at the time, so I got to go to the Deadwood set and watch them shoot a couple of scenes.
Oh, that's very cool too.
That's cool.
So that kind of at that point in your time, you were hoping to maybe work in Hollywood.
That was I thought game on. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm going to be a producer on David Milch's next show. Yeah, I thought like this was it,
Yeah.
but didn't work out.
Didn't work out. Well,
It's all for the better.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
gonna stay up here?
what did work out was you started a foundation with your brother, which is now called the it's called the Skate Park Project, formerly known as the Tony Hawk Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
What were the aspirations for that in the early on stages? Because you were in on the ground level and helped them create that. I mean, did you guys see it going to where it ended up being?
We hoped it would get to where it is now, but it took a while. Yeah, so the idea was, that was when his video game was doing really well, and he was doing well. My sister was his manager, and she said, you really got to figure out a way to give back. So at that point, I was out of work, and so I volunteered to start do all the paperwork to start this 501c3 nonprofit. And we call it Tony Hawk Foundation. And it was initially funded mostly through Tony and his sponsors. But the thing about my brother is he's not as rich as people think. He's way more famous than he is rich.
Yeah.
So we realized that if we really wanted this thing to succeed, we needed to get donations from corporations and other people who were much richer than him. So we eventually changed the name. Took a while.
Yeah.
To the Skate Park Project, and we were hovering at about our annual budget was about $700,000 to $1 million a year, and it was all based on one big fundraiser where Tony would have people skate and rich people would come in and donate money. But then we just right before the pandemic hired a guy who had some experience, who was very good at fundraising, named Benjamin Basheen, who has just crushed it. And we're now at like $3 million a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
We've donated combined, I think, more than $13 million to help build over 600 skate parks.
Yeah, it's nearly 700 from what I read.
Nearly 700,
now.
like 670
Which
or
is-
something.
Yeah.
And in all 50
Incredible.
states.
In all 50 states, yeah.
There's an international part to that too, isn't there?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've tried pretty hard to keep it domestic because there's still huge demand domestically.
Yeah.
And it's much more hard to navigate the municipalities and government agencies in foreign countries.
Yeah.
But it's still going strong, and we're actually, I think, on the verge of really kind of blowing up because skating's in the Olympics now. All of a sudden, all of these cities are realizing that skateboarders help downtown. I don't know if you've heard about what happened at the UN Plaza in San Francisco, but
Oh yeah,
it's
it's beautiful.
beautiful. Yeah, it used to be a drug den.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had to go down and hose it twice a day.
Wow.
And now they built these skate structures specifically to bring skateboarders back.
Yeah.
And other cities are starting to do the same thing. Realize that skaters actually they bring life to an urban area because they see it in a different way. They take joy in it in a way that other people don't. They use handrails for exactly the opposite reason that other people
They were
do.
built.
Yeah. And that's been really exciting to see that change because, the idea, so that UN, they don't call it a street park, they call it they don't call it a skate park, they call it a skate plaza
Oh,
because pedestrians are welcome to wander around and it looks like they're going to resurrect the Embarcadero.
that's so cool.
That's
which is
cool.
Really
Yeah.
killer.
Yeah.
Well, and I think Tony was just out there the other day.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
there for about a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I drove past him. Like,
Did you?
no way, it's Tony Hawk. Yeah,
Series, you saw him?
yeah, I saw
That's
him.
crazy.
Yeah, small world.
Wow.
Is there any project in particular that you might have had a bigger hand in than others, or one that you're like proud of, skate park wise?
Me or the foundation?
You.
No, I'm on the board now, and
Yeah.
well, actually, I'll say this: one of our first rounds of donations back in 2000 was we put the word out to send us applications. I think we got 17 applications that first quarter, and one of them was the Pacifica Park.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we gave them like $5,000 or something. Yeah, but it helped. But the idea there was that, because a skate park costs, like a good one costs $400,000, $500,000.
Yeah.
And but the idea was, if we gave someone a check for $10,000 that said Tony Hawk's Foundation on it, they could then go out and say, look, it's got the stamp of approval from this guy, so maybe
Yeah.
raise more money. That was the idea behind it, was to sort of leverage the
Yeah.
donations.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that one was fun.
Super cool.
Yeah.
And that was
True.
one of the early ones.
That was the first
That was
round.
the first round.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spent
cool.
a lot of time there
Yeah.
growing up. And then you've found yourself in some lifeguard-esque situations before.
Oh. One time.
Yeah, one
Yeah,
time.
that was a weird story. But every surfer I know in this area has had an experience where they saw someone in the water who shouldn't be in the water, who they had to like paddle out to and help.
Yeah.
And that happened to me at Graywell Cove a long time ago, where I was checking the surf from above, and there was a guy. It was a pretty good size wind swell day, like 10-foot faces, but short period and just nonstop.
Yeah.
And a guy was caught inside. He couldn't get out. He couldn't get in because he had drifted down in front of the rocks at the south end,
Oh, God.
and he was just paddling against the current and just paddling in place. And his friends were on the beach kind of yelling at him. And so I suited up and ran back down. And just as I was about to paddle out, one of his friends swam out toward him and got swept down into the rocks and just ended up getting all fucked up in the rocks. But I couldn't see that guy. So I paddled out to this guy. And but as I'm walking across the beach to him, he really made a big mistake and took his leash off because he thought that the leash was keeping him from, because he had having to duck dive these waves.
Yeah.
Now he had no flotation device,
Yeah.
So anyway, I get out to him, ask if he's all right. Turns out he's actually in the Coast Guard, so he's in pretty good shape.
Okay.
Says, yeah, I'm all right. I said, because your buddy's getting smashed on the rocks. So I paddled around, couldn't find his friend. Turned out he'd crawled up the cliff. But as I paddled around, south of Graywell, between Graywell and Montera, there's another cove.
Yeah.
And the guy's surfboard that he had taken off was on the beach at the cove.
No way.
It just like washed up onto the beach. So I went back to him and said, look, just hold on to my board and we'll drift around to the cove and we'll end up in the shore break and we'll roll up in the sand and it'll be fine. So that's kind of what happened. And
Wow.
Nice.
Lifeguards came out. But the fucked up thing about it was every emergency agency in the area responded. Like
Yeah.
Coast Guard, Pacifica,
Harbor Patrol.
Harbor Patrol, every CHP, sheriffs, and they shut the coast highway down
Oh,
because they had to get a helicopter to get the other guy off the
the cliff.
rocks.
Oh, wow.
And so we have to climb out of that little cove. There's like a rope that actually can take you up the bluff right there.
okay.
And we're walking with our boards down the coast highway, and everybody's pissed off that the highway's shut down, as you can imagine. And they're blaming us.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, but I
Like-
just kind of helped out. Yeah, but that was just a weird one-off thing. No, I've never
Yeah.
done any lifeguarding. That
Yeah.
was just-
Yeah.
No deed, no
Being in the
good
right
deed
place at the right
goes unpunished.
Every,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, I'll be on the beach with a buddy of mine at Kelly, and you'll see someone who's like on a really big day, like maybe he shouldn't be there.
I've been
And-
that person.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, do we turn around and walk away so we don't have to suit up?
Yeah.
Or do you sit here and watch? And yeah.
Yeah. They're lucky you were
But
there.
literally every surfer I know around here has got a story like that.
Yeah.
People just make mistakes all the
Mhm.
time.
So real quick, going to the Burnham Strip and near the jetty where the ramp is locally here. You were pretty vocal in wanting to change the name away from Burnham.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife and I. And then we tried to get the Granada Community Services District to change it to a Native American name, but they had already settled on Granada Granada Park.
Yeah.
And I understand the logic behind that.
Yeah.
But we lost that battle. It was kind of frustrating.
Yeah. And that's where the jetty ramp is. And
the good news is, that jetty ramp's there to stay.
Yeah.
What I love about that ramp was that was just a full DIY project.
Yeah.
Some guy snuck in there late at night,
Yep.
15 years ago with their headlights on and moved it from I forget whose house. And
Yeah.
Tim West.
no, the Tim West was part of it, but somebody had it in their backyard.
Might have been Casey.
Yeah, it might have been Casey.
Which Casey was part of it too, but it
Yeah.
wasn't his ramp.
Okay.
No, Casey was instrumental in all that for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
But then what happened was they moved it to near the Coast Highway. Then Caltrans said, we're going to tear it down. So we got like 60 people to one of those district meetings, and they agreed to cough up money to not just repair that old ramp, but take that one out and put in a whole brand new one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that ramp is good.
With
Yeah,
the
It's used a
weatherproofing.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you've seen the this one guy. He does scape and destroy. Like he's
Yeah.
a landscaper.
Jesse Arrowwood.
that guy's so
Yeah.
cool.
He's a landscaper.
Oh, I've seen
and
the
a
videos of
skater.
him. Yeah, he
Yeah.
goes and he cleans up.
Cleans them up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So he did that
Escape
to the
and
jetty.
destroy.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
There was a bunch of weeds like a couple weeks ago, springtime, and he just weed whacked around the ramp and then, did some sick tricks.
We should see if we can get him on.
Yes.
He
That's
does
such a great idea.
He has a
Yeah.
really. It's the whole.
He's not a
thing-
local guy, right?
No, he's from Santa Cruz.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's His whole thing is escape and destroy.
Yes.
It's so cool.
It's a great
It's
idea.
awesome what he does. Too.
Every time he starts a video, all you hear is "What up? What up?"
I just saw an Instagram thing of him where he did some of those little barriers where he cleaned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's him. Yeah. Well, obviously you weren't. Now that we know from the podcast, you weren't born here, but this community means so much to you, and
Yeah.
it's really cool for. Well, I kind of speaking for myself, but somebody whose family has been here for multiple generations to see somebody like you care so much about the community, and we were just curious, like, why do you want to keep the coast such a beautiful place? Because it seems like it's
Yeah.
coming from a very genuine place in your soul.
Yeah, wow. That's another big question. Part of it is, like I said earlier, that just, as a surfer, the coast means everything to me, and it's not just because I want to ride good waves. It's the whole experience. Being out there with just smelling it, when you walk down to the water, and the sensation of duck diving through a wave, and then even at the local beach breaks, if you're out in the water at like Venice and you look inland, that bowl is, you don't see any houses because of the
Yeah.
cliff. You just see those beautiful mountains,
Mhm.
And the surf's not often good there, but it can get really good. And when that happens, it's usually just you and your buddies, People don't really come here as a destination. And I just love that part of it. I love the surfers I've gotten to know. But, it goes back to when my kids were little. I coached a lot of Little League, a lot for 6 or 8 years, usually 2 teams. And I still can't go into a grocery store here without running into some kid or mom. I don't even recognize the kids anymore. And then I've met a lot of really cool people, interesting people with gigantically wide backgrounds in the parking lots while getting in and out of my wetsuit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually have a party. It used to be annual, but I'm going to try to bring it back. The organizing principle of which was people I met in the parking lot while surfing.
Yeah.
So I would, like in the months before the party, I'd go out to these guys who I talk to. I see all the time. I have nicknames for them, but I never. There's like Longboard Joe and Barefoot Bruce because he never wears booties, and I would get their contact info, and then we'd have a party.
Yeah.
And you could see these guys had all seen each other in the water. A lot of times, been kind of grumpy because it's a limited resource, and nobody gets everybody feels like they're not getting their share. But that vibe just completely changes in the water once you talk to somebody. It's, that whole idea of like finding out the name of your enemy in warfare.
Yeah.
You're less likely to shoot their head off.
Yeah.
and I've got, my dearest friend is a guy I met because when I moved in to El Granada, he lived across the street and he had surfboards in his garage, and we kind of hit it off, and we've spent countless hours together, shoulder to shoulder in the car looking for surf. That's where you get to know people. So yeah, it's a spectacular natural area within spitting distance of one of the great metropolises in the world. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
No, and we can tell you love the place, and we've seen articles of you even picking up trash with Surf Rider and with a
wow. I don't remember that.
Yeah,
He does.
But I mean, everybody tries to clean up the beach a little bit.
Besides surfing, I mean, what's something that you hold near to your heart that like helps you disconnect? Something that you do to just kind of unwind, or is surfing just like the only thing that gets
So
you there?
surfing's the only like serious activity I do. I started just in the last couple of years actually going to a gym with a trainer, with my buddy I was just talking about, Kevin. We go twice a week, and then I do Pilates once a week. But that's more just to kind of keep myself from falling apart.
Yeah.
And to build a little more strength. But I like to walk on the beach by myself and kind of check things out. Beachcomb, I love that. I like to just sit down with a good book and read for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And I haven't done it for a while, but I really like to fly fish. I love that.
Okay.
Nice.
The Zen thing that goes on there.
Yeah.
I like to just go up. My wife and I sometimes will go up into the Sierras and just find a place to camp. I like doing that.
Yeah.
And I like to cook.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
What's the go-to meal?
So this is a guy you guys have to have on.
Okay.
I belong to the Sea Forager CSA.
Okay.
All right.
Have you heard of that?
I haven't.
No,
Well,
we'll
so
look it up.
it's Kirk Lombard, I think his last name is. He's out of Moss Beach, and he and his wife own this company where they source fish from all these different fishermen around the Bay Area and actually farther afield. Every other week, delivered to El Granada Beverage in El Granada. They give you pay for it, obviously.
Yeah.
You get a pound of the freshest fish you've ever had.
Okay.
Wow.
So tonight it's halibut.
Yeah. Halibut just opened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to actually cook in a fish market when I was right out of college. So I got a sense of like the difference between good fresh fish and bad fresh fish.
Yeah.
This is the freshest fish I've ever had.
Okay.
So anything that Sea Forager wants to deliver to me is going to be good. A couple of weeks ago it was bluefin tuna. So we just had sushi.
Wow.
Nice.
And it's a little bit pricey. It's like $25 a pound or something, but you spend that much in grocery store.
And you know what you're getting.
And you know what you're getting. You know it's fresh, and he does a really good job of telling you the story behind the fisherman who caught it. He gets black cod a lot. I don't know if you've ever had sablefish black cod.
Oh yeah.
That is the most amazing, oily, rich fish.
Yeah.
So yeah, any fresh fish from Sea Forager,
Cool.
I'm down. Yeah.
With beachcombing, this is it's kind of crazy, but my grandma, she had a place in Miramar, and my aunt at one point was just beachcombing down at the end of the street, went down there, and she found a mammoth molar.
Whoa.
Come on.
She found a mammoth molar at Miramar.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did they verify that?
She used to, I don't know, she has friends in Smithsonian, and I think it's there. I don't know. She donated it.
Wow.
But yeah, very cool, crazy
Wow.
find on the beach.
You know what else is at the Smithsonian? His old skateboard.
That's right. A different wing.
Yeah, a different way. Yeah.
I got to do beachcombing at this island in the Aleutians my last trip up there. We went way out. I was part of this excursion that went from the beginning of the Aleutians to the end of the Aleutians.
Okay.
But I was on like the second leg. I went from Dutch Harbor to Adak Island, about 400 miles. And we stopped in this area called the Island of the Four Volcanoes. I think that's what it's called, the Island of the Four Mountains. And we found this beach that was like a half mile of black sand, and it's like the very north of the North Pacific, so it's just like a catcher's mitt, and there were no rocks because it was like this isthmus between two volcanoes, so anything that washed up didn't break.
Oh wow.
And there were bottles and glass, those glass.
Oh, the
buoys.
Japanese
Japanese
glass
glass
buoys. Yeah.
The skipper, the first mate of the boat, got to shore about 15 minutes before all of us, and was kind of a dick about it. He got like 11 of those
Oh,
Wow.
in like
Wow.
15 minutes. But
Yeah.
I got this bottle. I didn't have room for more. I have this gigantic blue bottle that's like 14 inches high. That's like sea glass, burnished like sea glass. It's
Okay.
still got a little stopper in it.
Oh wow.
It's insane. It's the most beautiful thing in our house.
That's
But I picked it up off the fucking beach.
Yeah.
all intact too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
The Aleutians are for beachcombing just ridiculous.
Yeah, I know it's like popular to like for all the bush pilots, like they'll look for like walrus tusks.
Wow.
But-
Yeah.
What a kind of a bit of a transition, but what's something that you hope to, when you're dead and gone one day, what's something that you hope that you're able to pass down? Life wise,
Hmm.
advice wise,
Legacy.
legacy wise.
Wow. I would say probably that I modeled a good life for my kids that they would want to follow and pass on to their kids
Yeah.
as my dad did for me.
Yeah.
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 I would say that's probably it. And then I've also helped a few young writers along the way get better at what they do and give them the conviction and the confidence to go on and really make a go at it. Yeah. That I love that part too.
What would you
Yeah.
tell a young writer that is aspiring in either in, I guess, media or
Read really good stuff.
okay.
Find a writer who you admire, who maybe you could talk to, and get some advice from them. And mainly just put your butt in the fucking chair and write.
Yeah.
Buckle down and get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you have anything coming up in the future you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I just sold my first novel to Viking Books. It's set here on the coast. It's
Oh,
called
nice.
Near Shore, and it's a thriller set in the surf world. Also, some Stanford business school in it, and a bad guy billionaire, and nuclear bombs. And
Sweet.
when I put it all together like that, it sounds outrageous, but I think it kind of works. And it's coming out next summer. And I hope to come back to your podcast when it's coming out so I can flog it and give it some PR
Yeah.
and talk just about the book.
Definitely.
Hopefully,
but-
yeah.
The assignment will be you will all have to read it.
That's
Oh,
yeah.
for
I was
sure.
gonna say if we can get it before,
Yeah.
we'll get through it. And
As long as the nukes come out of the golf ball point.
Or the old bunker.
the golf balls in the in the very third page of the book.
Okay.
Awesome.
I call it golf ball of
Yeah.
the gods.
Okay.
Well, congrats on the sale of your first
Yeah.
novel. Yeah,
Congrats. Yeah.
that's incredible.
Well,
We're
we
excited
look forward to
hear that.
having you
Yeah.
back on.
Oh, yeah,
That's
I
for
would
sure.
love it. Thank you guys. It's
Thank
been
you.
really
Yeah.
fun.
Thank
you.
you for just
Very good questions, and what a lot of research. It's kind of scary. I didn't know that.
Well, thank you for allowing us to give you a platform to tell your amazing story. So,
Thanks, man.
yeah.
Really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Between Shifts podcast. This is our little recap segment. Yeah,
What an absolute honor to
That
have
was-
Steve on.
Steve Hawk.
Yeah,
Super sick.
Yeah.
yeah.
Insane stories. For
Insane
one,
stories.
a sailboat from Cape Horn to Antarctica is nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just kind of psycho.
3 days in like the craziest water ever
But also,
on a boat.
yeah, on a boat.
Yeah,
Went through the Drake. What is it? The Drake Passage,
I think
right?
that's what is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Something
and it's
like that.
And it's like the boat,
It's like
hit
the
a rock.
deadliest.
like,
yeah.
and if something bad actually happened, Coast Guard ain't getting it. Well, it's not even the U.S., so
Yeah.
it's not.
It's funny too
There's
because
nothing.
like mainstream now you see videos from Dylan Graves going to these crazy places, but like it's insane to meet somebody that did that without all the videography and just
Just went and did it.
pure passion, just going to go.
Well, and it's like it was being documented, you know, like he's
Yeah.
a writer, and I'm sure they had photographers and all that,
Yeah.
but just not to the extent that we see stuff like that covered these days. You
Yeah.
know, like these days
Yeah.
you sit down, if a crew of people did that, you're talking about like a 20 to 20 minute, half-hour long YouTube video that you sit
Yeah.
down and watch. But yeah.
Imagine how many times he went through the effort to get to a place and was just completely skunked. Like
Oh.
no waves, nothing. And he's
Oh, yeah.
just there, which isn't a bad situation to be in because you're in a new place of the world and you're traveling. But like, I imagine that would be very frustrating.
Yeah.
Because you spent the time and the resources just to get there.
I wonder what percentage of the population's been to all 7 continents. There's probably not that many people. It's probably
It's got to be like 2%.
no 2%.
No,
That
it's-
all 7 continents?
Way less.
Think about how many
So-
people in
so-
town. You think about, okay, Half Moon Bay is a small town, but like not a lot of people even in the Bay Area, let alone California in general, have
yeah,
been to
we're saying
all
it's
It's
small.
it's got to be like
Oh, wow. You're saying it's
Point-
bigger. That's all you guys are fucking crazy.
0.01%. It's
Yeah.
probably only like a couple hundred people that have
Yeah,
been to
yeah.
all 7 continents.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, 2% would be like millions.
Okay.
But
yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
with
Yeah.
Steve, I think it's I mean, I don't know many riders, but I feel like it is very popular to, I mean, you have a lot of jobs. I feel like as a rider, if you stay in one position forever, then you get bored. And so it makes a lot of sense that he's had so many jobs. But I mean, like newspapers for years, and then like surfer magazines, whether it's surfer, surfing, all of them. And then going into Sierra Club, and then like Sanford, like,
Action Sports Group.
yeah,
all of
it's
them.
just it's such a crazy career.
Yeah.
So now writing his own novel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was a challenging episode for us as an interviewer because, yes, he's Tony Hawk's brother, and it's really easy to get caught up in that part of
Yeah.
his life. And the cool part about Steve is he's so proud of his brother that there's no, like, he never gets sick about talking about him either.
Especially being
So-
like somewhat of a father figure to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was difficult for us because, like a lot of you guys listening, we grew up watching Tony Hawk,
Yep.
listening to things about Tony Hawk, and to get his brother on and not like ask him a bunch of questions about Tony Hawk was super difficult. But he has such a badass life himself
Yeah.
that it just flowed through it.
Well, and it was important to us to stay on topic, or try
Yeah.
to stay on topic about his life.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
He's got so many interesting stories, and
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
it's kind of cool. He I'd almost don't know if he wanted to talk about the time he saved the guy at Graywell Cove.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought that was the coolest thing, where he like beat the Coast Guard and Harbor Patrol and the cops and everyone, and even to
Yeah,
help
right
someone.
place at the right time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was also cool. The mics, we were just downstairs bullshitting before the episode, but he told us a story about how he got on with the scientists that were working with the great white sharks around the Farallon Islands, and he was writing a story about that. And that
The
was
California Great White Shark Project.
yes, what David said. But it was really cool just to hear how he ended up on that boat and like get to go out, and I've always wanted to just watch people chum the waters and just see a shark. And he was explaining it, and I'm like, this is so cool.
I want to get back in the boat.
Yeah. Hopefully the boat doesn't sink.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's so
Well-
cool. He's got to be so connected.
Yeah.
He knows so many people,
Definitely.
and that's
Such a
all the
humble guy
careers,
too.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, that was our episode with Steve Hawk. We hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yep.
Yeah, we're the Between Shifts team. Checking out.
Yeah. And don't forget, check us out on YouTube for definitely a different vibe. And we're on Apple, Spotify. Thanks, guys, for listening again. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Later.
Thank you.
Service, sales, and rentals in Half Moon Bay, California. Whether you're on the mountain, road, or low on battery, BikeWorks HMB has your back. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help support this podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at betweenshiftspod@gmail.com. The link will be in the description. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. GT signing off.